The Long March of Everyman. Themes and variations from the history of the people in Britain. Program 2, A Sigh on the Harp. Celtic Britain. Composed and produced by Daniel Snowman under the direction of Anne Ross, former Research Fellow at the University of Edinburgh.
Bedd I march, bedd I gweithiwr, bedd I gigain gletfryd, anoeth byd bedd I Arthur.
The grave of Arthur will not be known.
The island of Britain. Situated on almost the utmost border of the earth, stretches out from the southwest towards the North Pole, and is 800 miles long and 200 broad. It is surrounded by the ocean, which forms winding bays, and is strongly defended by this ample barrier, save on the south side, where the narrow sea affords a passage through Belgic Gall.
When the Romans came to Britain in the 1st century BC, first of all, they found that the island was apparently known as Ynys Prydain, and the natives called themselves something like Britanni or Britanni. They couldn't quite get that, and so they called the island Britannia and the people Britons.
The island of Britain is enriched by the mouths of two noble rivers, the Thames and the Severn. Its plains are spacious, its hills are pleasantly situated, adapted for superior tillage, and its mountains are admirably calculated for the alternate pasturage of cattle, where flowers of various colors, trodden by the feet of man, give it the appearance of a lovely picture.
To the south and the east, there are the lowlands, young, soft, extroverted, and always very easily accessible. It's easiest to live there.
Whilst it is irrigated by abundant lakes, which pour forth cool torrents of refreshing water.
Then, in the north and the west, there are the highlands, which are built of the ancient hard rocks, very hard, introverted, and relatively inaccessible. Atlantic winds come in and tend to wrap them in driving rain and mist, the Celtic mist. Not very many people live among the higher mountains.
We passed many miles this day without seeing a house, but only little summer huts.
James Boswell was the lowland Scot who conducted Dr. Samuel Johnson on his really remarkable and heroic tour of the Scottish Highlands in 1773.
At Auchnarshiel, they brought us out 2 wooden dishes of milk, which we tasted. One of them was frothed like a syllabub. We had a considerable circle about us, men, women, and children. Not one of them could speak English. I observed to Dr. Johnson it was much the same thing as being with a tribe of Indians. There was a great diversity in the faces of the circle around us. Some were as black and wild in their appearance as any American savages whatever.
The Romans used to give them as much drink as they could to make them drunk after a battle, and then they would quarrel about dividing the spoils out amongst each other. They'd start fighting each other. They'd end up losing half of their men and losing the spoils and everything else.
I've been singing it some of the wakes in Ireland. what a tremendous reception I got. I got a tremendous, and it was the greatest, this peculiar, funniest thing that ever I saw. They were round the coffin, and they had the corpse set up, sitting with a clay pipe in its mouth. And they were all drinking, and they started to sing around the cottage, and as it was moving off, when did he die, when did he die, and so on and so on. And of course, those dramas and everything, of course, I got, to tell you the truth, I got a bit tipsy with the liquor that they were giving me.
They've always had this great passion for drinking, which then led to quarrelling, which then led to fighting, and to all the other troubles afterwards.
This land, stiff-necked and stubborn-minded from the time of its being first inhabited, ungratefully rebels against God, sometimes against her own citizens, and frequently also against foreign kings and their subjects.
One of the later and very interesting chroniclers of British history and observers of Britain and Ireland in the 12th century was a person called Giraldus the Welshman, or Giraldus Cambrensis, and he was a priest who was very much concerned with his own culture and history.
As in times of scarcity, their abstinence and parsimony are too severe. So when seated at another man's table after a long fasting, their appetite is immoderate. They are therefore penurious in times of scarcity and extravagant in times of plenty.
Celts are extravagant. They're extravagant in everything. Their art is wildly extravagant, expressive, turbulent.
They were wild, the Scots. They roamed the countryside, and the English only roamed the town. They never had a lot of running around. They never had enough practice.
They've always loved dressing themselves up, and when men wore jewellery in pagan Celtic times, they used to wear very elaborate and very beautiful neck ornaments called torques, and bracelets and rings and gold-plated belts, and their weapons were beautifully adorned, their chariots were decorated, their horses were decorated. They must have made a marvellous sight at the height of their power on the continent and in Britain.
The whole race is madly fond of war, high-spirited and quick to battle.
The Celts have always been very, very proud of themselves, proud of their own immediate ancestors, proud of their reputation, jealous of it, and in battle, the Celts particularly liked single combat. A hero would call out another hero from another tribe to single combat.
They frequently exaggerate with the aim of extolling themselves and diminishing the status of others. They are boasters and threateners and given to bombastic self-dramatization.
Camelot, Antri Laurel, Agarta, Heather Corfwell, Panzerella and Ilcomandia.
The people of Cornwall and of Brittany speak a language similar to that of the Britons, and from its origin and near resemblance, it is intelligible to the Welsh in many instances, and almost in all. And although less delicate and methodical, yet it approaches, as I judge, more to the ancient British idiom.
They could get almost drunk on just the use of words and the power of language, the love of words. And they are capable of being tremendously evocative. They have a beautiful knack of stringing words together and bringing out something which is beautiful or hideous, as the case may be, deeply nostalgic, and always very, very moving.
Cyn bîm cain waglaw, y bîm cyffes ereo. Cain mygu riweres, gwir arco tyrio et amporthes.
Before my back was bent, I was already speaker. My fame was great. Before my back was bent, I was bold, welcome in beer houses.
I and Panger ban my cat. 'Tis a like task we are at. Hunting mice is his delight. Hunting words, I sit all night.
In conversation they use few words and speak in riddles, for the most part hinting at things and leaving a great deal to be understood.
Wooden crook, it is autumn. Ferns are red, grass is yellow. Him I refused is now my fellow. Wooden crook, it is winter. Drinking men are talkative. My bedside is not festive. Wooden crook, it is spring. Cuckoos are red. There's feasting light. I am no more the girl's delight.
Before my back was bent, I was already speaker.
Miss MacLean produced some Erse poems by a famous bard in Mull who had died only a few years ago. He could neither read nor write. She read and translated two of them. One, a kind of elegy on Sir John MacLean's being obliged to fly his country in 1715. Another, a dialogue between two Roman Catholic young ladies, sisters, whether it was better to be a nun or to marry. I could not perceive much poetical imagery in the translation, yet all of our company who understood Erse seemed charmed with the original.
Apart from words and the love of speech and language and poetry, the Celts love music. They always have loved it. They have a great passion for it, and have and had their own musical instruments. The harp was very typical of their culture, and to have people singing to harp music was very desirable and very widespread in the old Celtic world.
They have lyric poets whom they call bards. They sing to the accompaniment of instruments resembling lyres.
Their musical instruments charm and delight the ear with their sweetness, are borne along by such celerity and delicacy of modulation, producing such a consonance from the rapidity of seemingly discordant touches. Of their musical concerts, they do not sing in unison like the inhabitants of other countries, but in many different parts. Songs and set speeches, they are so subtle and ingenious that they produce in their native tongue ornaments of wonderful and exquisite invention, both in the words and sentences.
There is a fine fortress above the sea, and whilst the sea performs its bravery, the bards are above over their cups of mead. The wave rushes towards it in all haste. They leave the Atlantic to the Pictish tribes.
They are penurious in times of scarcity and extravagant in times of plenty.
The Highlander spends his money as free as a joke. If a man in the 93rd had a shilling in his pocket, it was gone before he could turn it twice.
Men went to Cartwright. Keen was their company. They were fed on fresh mead, and it proved poison. 300 warriors ordered for warfare.
The two most important tribes of the Britons in the north are the Caledonians and the Maeatai. They eat no fish, though their waters teem with all kinds of them.
Their food consists of a small number of loaves of bread, together with a large amount of meat, either boiled or roasted on charcoal or on spits.
Almost all the people live upon the produce of their herds, with oats, milk, cheese, and butter.
They tended to spread first on the lighter lands, on the chalk hills, on the limestone hills, and also they went along the river valleys where the gravel was firm underfoot. All those regions where trees were slightly thinner and it was easier to clear them.
They live in tents, naked and shoeless. They have their women in common and rear all their offspring. Their government is democratic, and they take the utmost delight in forays for plunder. They can endure hunger and thirst and every kind of hardship.
The inhabitants of the Highlands of Scotland stick close to their ancient and idle way of life.
She was huge of frame, terrifying of aspect, and with a harsh voice.
These women are not only equal to their husbands in stature, but they rival them in strength also.
The Celtic women had a very high role. They could achieve high status as queens or as priestesses, and there are various references, both for the continental Celts and for the Britons, to powerful women who fought in battle. They went into battle armed and had tremendous power over the men and could rule supremely and on their own, like Boudica herself, whose name means victory.
A whole band of foreigners would be unable to cope with one of the men in a fight if he called in his wife. Stronger than he by far, and with flashing eyes, least of all when she swells her neck and gnashes her teeth, and poising her huge wide arms, begins to rain blows mingled with kicks.
Physically, they are terrifying in appearance, with deep sounding and very harsh voices.
The Celts were headhunters, and they cut off the heads of their enemies in battle and used them as trophies.
There is a fine fortress over the wide water, a bright homestead with the sea about it. Ask Britain who is master there.
Thursday there was dishonor, which they refused. There was blood on hair and a sigh on the harp.
Bedd I march, bedd I gweithiwr, bedd I gigain gletfryd, anoeth byd bedd I Arthur.
A grave for Mark, a grave for Gwythor, a grave for Gugaun, Retsword. The grave of Arthur will not be known.
In the middle of the chamber floor, the King Arthur was seated on a couch of fresh rushes, with a coverlet of yellow-red brocaded silk under him, and a cushion and its cover of red brocaded silk under his elbow.
Here lies Arthur, the once and future king.
Arthur
developed such a code of courtliness in his household that he inspired peoples living far away to imitate him.
Off went the boy on a steed with light grey head and a gold tubular bridle bit in its mouth, and under him a precious gold saddle, and in his hand a battle-axe. Never a hair-tip stirred upon him, so exceedingly light his steeds canter under him on his way to the gate of Arthur's court.
Even the man of noblest birth, once he was roused to rivalry, thought nothing at all of himself unless he wore his arms and dressed in the same way as Arthur's knights.
An army was vanity compared with Sigh in battle. When he drank from a horn, he would drink as much as 4. Into battle when he came, he slew as would 100. Unless God should accomplish it, Sigh's death would be unattainable.
Arthur is supposed to have fought the Battle of Mons Badonicus somewhere and to have been victorious, and then there was another great battle, the Battle of Camlan.
The grave of Arthur will not be known.
I think the most Celtic thing about Arthur is that he is not only a great warrior, he has all the Celtic characteristics of size and power and invincibility and sumptuous clothing and personal adornment, but he also is involved with magical characters and takes part in magical and heroic and supernatural situations.
Yet some men say in many parts of England that King Arthur is not dead, but that he shall come again.
And in this material you get the whole Celtic habit of not differentiating clearly between reality and unreality, between what belongs to the mundane world and what belongs to the world of superstition and religion.
There is written upon his tomb this verse: Hic jacet Arthurus, rex quandam rexque futurus. Here lies Arthur, the once and future king.
Then it was that the magnanimous Arthur, with all the kings and military force of Britain, fought against the Saxons. He was 12 times the chosen commander and was as often conqueror.
2 dragons, one white, the other red, came forth and approaching one another began a terrible fight and cast forth fire with their breath. But the white dragon had the advantage and made the other fly to the end of the lake. But the red dragon, for grief at his flight, renewed the assault upon his pursuer and forced him to retire.
Merlin went to Vortigern's court and prophesied about the outcome of the battles with the Saxons.
The white dragon signified the Saxons whom you invited over, but the red denotes the British nation, which shall be oppressed by the white. Therefore shall its mountains be levelled as the valleys, and the rivers of the valleys shall run with blood. But at last the oppressed shall prevail, and oppose the cruelty of foreigners.
Merlin was known as Merlin Wilt, Merlin the Wild, or mad, and he's believed to have become deranged in battle. This is a regular Celtic motif, and he fled to the woods, and he became a sort of great inspired, semi-mad prophet.
Before my back was bent, I was brilliant. My spear was first. I was spearhead.
Men went to Catrice.
The real trouble by about 350 AD was trouble from the Celtic tribes to the north and west, the attacks by the Scots and the Picts and the Atticotti and so forth. These were the enemy, these were the people to be feared, and the Romans were regarded very much as protectors.
Marcus Coxius Firmus pays his respects to the Genii of the land of Britain.
No sooner were the Romans gone than the Picts and Scots, like worms, which in the heat of midday come from their holes, hastily land again from their canoes, differing one from another in manners, but inspired with the same ability for blood. All the councillors were so blinded that as a protection to their country they sealed its doom by inviting among them the fierce and impious Saxons.
And they started settling and then gradually bringing in more and more of their own people until they themselves, instead of being the sort of paid protectors, became the enemy and started to try to take over the land and the country from the Britons, which they did eventually succeed in doing.
The white dragon signified the Saxons whom you invited over, but the red denotes the British nation, which shall be oppressed by the white.
Him I refused is now my fellow.
One of the best documented, because this poem, the Godolphin, was written about it, was the Battle of Catraeth, which was fought about 600 at Catterick Bridge in Yorkshire.
After the wine feast and the mead feast, they hastened out, men renowned in battle straits, reckless of their lives. In a shining array they fed together round the wine vessel. They set their hands to wine and mead and malt. Out of 300 champions who hastened to Cattraeth, alas, none came back but for one man.
If you are desirous to honour the burying place of these men with an everlasting monument, ascend for the giants Danes, which is in Killarhouse, a mountain in Ireland. Their mystical stones are of a medicinal virtue. The giants of old brought them from the farthest coast of Africa and placed them in Ireland while they inhabited that country. There is not a stone there which has not some healing virtue. And if they can be placed here, as they are there, round this spot of ground, they will stand forever.
Stonehenge started simply with a bank and a ditch and a few holes where the burnt bones of the dead were poured. As centuries went by, just as later with Gothic cathedrals, they added to them each 100 years or so. So they did with Stonehenge. This was the first time that men had really made tremendous mark upon the countryside, something that could be seen from far off.
The grave of Arthur will not be known.
One can't say that Celts went out overnight and were replaced by Saxons, but that there was a gradual sinking of their culture in the heavily Saxon areas, and they much more exclusively became confined to the southwest, to Devon and Cornwall, and to the West Wales, up in Cumberland, Strathclyde, and then in Scotland and the Hebrides, and of course Ireland. Iron Age Celtic society did continue in Gaelic Scotland right until the rebellion of 1745.
We have no country to fight for. You robbed us of our country and gave it to the sheep.
They just couldn't take or accept Highland society. It wasn't real. It wasn't something which fitted into the economy of the time, to the growth and development of the trade of the time. It was something so utterly foreign and archaic, and they just couldn't adjust to it or accept it, and it simply had to go.
I was present at the pulling down and burning of the house of William Chisholm of Ballinloskin, in which was lying his wife's mother, an old bedridden woman of nearly 100 years of age. I informed the persons about to set fire to the house of this circumstance, and prevailed upon them to wait till the Duke of Sutherland's bailiff came. On his arrival, I told him of the poor old woman being in a condition unfit for removal. He replied,
"Damn her, the old witch, let her burn."
Fire was immediately set to the house, and the blankets in which she was carried were in flames before she could get out. She was placed in a little shed and it was with great difficulty that they were prevented from firing it also. She died within 5 days.
Look around you and see the gentry, with no pity for the poor creatures, with no kindness to their kin.
We have no country to fight for. You robbed us of our country and gave it to the sheep. Therefore, since you have preferred sheep to men, let sheep defend you.
Bleonan and Kuro, the year of the sheep.
He spoke a word in Gaelic to the dog and it was off, like an arrow up the hillside, disappearing over the top. I remained to watch. I've since witnessed sheepdog trials in England and Wales, but for quiet, unostentatious training, I'd give Donald the palm. I was amused somewhat at Donald's views as regards training animals.
When I get a new horse or a new dog, I always give it a good thrashing straight away, for you must prove to them that you are master. Maybe women should be treated the same.
These women are not only equal to their husbands in stature, but they rival them in strength also.
Stand out, girls, and gaze towards Cumberland's land. The hall of Penguin burns, and for her coverlet a sad girl yearns.
Out of 300 champions who hastened to Catrice, alas, none came back but for one man.
Cumberland's hall is dark tonight. No fire, no bed. I'll weep a while and then be still.
White town of this countryside, green mounds are now your honour, and blood men trample under. White town between Tren and Trodoid, more torn shields came home from battle than homing cattle. White town between Tren and Traval, there was more blood on your field's face than ploughshare's trace.
They invite strangers to their banquets, and only after the meal do they ask who they are and of what they stand in need.
Those who arrive in the morning are entertained till evening with the conversation of young women and the music of the harp. For each house has its young women and harps allotted to this purpose. In the evening, when no more guests are expected, the meal is prepared according to the number and dignity of the persons assembled and according to the wealth of the family who entertains.
Lots of baking used to be done and still is in many places, and the girdle scone and the pancake and of course the porridge, the oatmeal based dishes were very popular.
A bed made of rushes and covered with a coarse kind of cloth manufactured in the country is then placed along the side of the room, and they all in common lie down to sleep. Nor is their dress at night different from that by day, for at all season they defend themselves from the cold only by a thin cloak and tunic.
They walk nimbly, with a kind of stateliness, in the midst of their poverty.
The whole Gallic people is exceedingly given to religious superstition.
If you go into a house in many parts of the Highlands, you'll find a sprig of rowan inside the door, which is believed to keep the witches away. And of course horseshoes were used a great deal. And there were many beliefs in the powers of wells which could confer fertility both on cattle and on human beings. wells which were called the toothache well, which if you threw in hazelnuts and hawthorn twigs and drank the water in a certain way, you'd get your toothache cured. The drinking out of the skull of an epileptic was carried on right up until recent years, and I believe still is in some parts of the Highlands.
I have seen the monster 5 times in different parts of the loch. The last time in March this year. It looked like an upturned fishing boat about 18 inches out of the water and about 15 to 18 feet long. I've no idea what it is. I can only say that I have seen this very strange thing in the loch with my own eyes.
Neither mother nor father was my maker. My source and my mould were the sense ninefold, springing from roots, primroses and hill bloom, of tree and shrub blossom, of earth and of clay, on my birthday, of nettle bloom and the 9th wave's foam.
Rex quandam, rexque futurus, the once and future king.
They are chiefly anxious to have men believe the following: that souls do not suffer death, but after death pass from one body to another.
I am a powerful ox. I am a hawk on a cliff. I am a dewdrop in the sunshine.
Oh, I'm sad arising early in the morning going to herd the cattle. I see the hind and her mate playing together. Oh, God, they're fortunate. It's not so that befell me and Donald, son of James. Oh, no, they took me by force out to the little glen of the hills to be the dairymaid of cattle. They took me to the young graceful lady, the lady who fed hundreds of people who could read and write. Oh, it's sad that I was not for the length of a week in the form of a wild goose, or even a duck, or in the form of a seagull. I would swim the broad ocean, I'd climb the castle, I'd break the locks until I would get you out.
Once more, transformed, I was a blue salmon, I was a dog, I was a stag, a roebuck in the mountains. I was a speckled white cock, desirous of hens.
The Britons deemed it unlawful to eat hares, fowls, or geese, but they kept those animals for pleasure.
I do not adore the vices of birds, nor sneezing, nor lots in this world, nor a boy, nor omens, nor women. My druid is Christ the Son of God.
I don't think that the impact of Christianity made such a tremendous difference to the society at all. It was the policy of the Christian church, just as it was of the Romans, to allow the continuing veneration of the pagan deities in the form of saints. The great pagan goddess Breach in Ireland became St. Bridget of Kildare, and this must have happened in many cases where the pagan deity wasn't too horrific, or where there weren't too many traditions of human sacrifice and violently anti-Christian behavior.
The fine armor of Columba is protecting you from the fairy arrows, against the screeching cranes, against the gnawing cranes, against the temptations of the present world, against the wickedness of the world beyond.
There was one minister who denounced the local dance hall. It's really a village hall which is used for dances among other things. And he said that fire would come from heaven and destroy it because it was a palace of Satan and all the rest of it. And for quite a while after that, many parents refused to allow their daughters to attend the dance because they thought that that was really going to happen. And very soon after, the minister had said that there was a dance in the hall one night and there was a terrible thunderstorm. It was the night the Clan Macquarie went aground on the west side of Lewis. And many of the young people in the hall ran home for their lives because they thought that the minister's prophecy was coming true and that the place was going to go in flames at any minute.
I have journeyed thrice to Jerusalem and 7 times to Rome for the love of God. It now remains that for the sake of prayer I should go to the church of St. Andrew the Apostle, which is known to have been built in Albany, which they commonly call Scotland.
Having distributed benedictions and perfected all in the name of the Holy Trinity,
Patrick embarked on the sea, and after a quick passage arrived in Britain, where he preached for some time. Every necessary preparation being made, and the angel giving him warning, he came to the Irish Sea. And having filled the ship with foreign gifts and spiritual treasures, by permission of God, he arrived in Ireland, where he baptized and preached.
Whoever places the wider end of St. Patrick's horn to his ear will hear a sweet sound and melody united, such as ariseth from a harp gently touched.
Did you hear what the thrush sang? When you travel through wild country, don't let your enemy be your companion. Did you hear what the fish sang as he floundered among the stalks? Nature is stronger than education.
Fighting is better than loneliness.
Before my back was bent, I was brilliant. My spear was first. I was spearhead. I'm round-backed, heavy and wretched.
This nation may now, as in former times, be harassed, and in a great measure weakened and destroyed. But it can never be totally subdued through the wrath of man, unless the wrath of God shall concur. Nor do I think that any other nation than this of Wales, or any other language, whatever may hereafter come to pass, shall, in the day of severe examination before the Supreme Judge, answer for this corner of the earth.
Mam wedi gweld yn stal, a fi'n cael wair wrth ymrawd i'r ddechrau o lecw. Mae Bob Williams Parry yma heno addodd i'r
This nation can never be totally subdued.
A Sigh on the Harp. The readers were Henry Stamper, Anthony Hall, Hayden Jones and William Edel. The commentary was by Anne Ross and Jaquetta Hawkes. The producer for The Voices of the People was Charles Parker. Special music, sound composition and orchestration were by David Kane, assisted by Norman MacLeod. The series was created by Michael Mason in the BBC Radiophonic Workshop.